The Waitsfield Historical Society is pleased to present As We Were, a photographic essay on life in the Mad River Valley in the period between about 1870 and 1915. Photographers took advantage of the valley's pleasant scenery and attractive buildings. The 1875 church in the center of Waitsfield Village, with its impressive steeple, still attracts the attention of today's photographers. The 1833 covered bridge, situated just downstream from the remnants of the village dam, spans the Mad River and is the second oldest covered bridge in the state, still in use today. The view of the northern part of the village, taken in 1874, furnishes a yardstick by which we can measure the changes which have taken place. The Waitsfield Historical Society is fortunate inasmuch as it has a collection of glass plate negatives created by two professional and one amateur photographer. H.B. Cady and his successor, E.P. Chase, conducted a photography business in Waitsfield Village until the early 1900s. Mr. Cady ran a mobile component of his business from what Deere's Atlas of Washington County calls a photographer's car. It was a combination studio and laboratory housed in a structure on a wagon pulled by oxen. He operated in this fashion throughout the region and was photographed in a location in Village Square in Rochester. This is a view of one of his buildings as it appears today. Walter Jones owned a mercantile operation and made postcards from many of his images, which he sold in his store. He was also a typical young parent who took many pictures of his wife and first daughter. The fundamental cycles of family life mirror those that we recognize today. From the nurturing of infants through early education to young adulthood, we endeavored to equip the next generation to take our places. We cared for our babies in summer. And winter. We provided for their education in both central locations and rural one-room facilities. We dutifully recorded the populations of our school buildings, both smaller and larger. Family get-togethers included picnics, and visits to Moss Glen Falls in Granville. Courting may have been enhanced with sleigh rides, buggy rides, and boat rides on the Mad River. Our young adults matured, married, and the eternal cycle was repeated. Farm life relied heavily on manual labor to provide food for the family and the animals. Many farms were subsistence operations where cash money was at a premium. Activities were often accomplished by trading works where 2 or 3 families would cooperate in labor-intensive activities. Haying was one such example. It was, however, an equal opportunity endeavor even at the beginning of the 20th century. Highways have changed considerably. The road on the left is a section of Route 100 north of Waitsfield Village. Routine work did not demand all of a person's time, however. Harriet Smith found time to bottle feed an abandoned fawn. Meanwhile, a group of boys is training a yoke of oxen behind the Congregational church. Our intrepid haymakers demonstrate that they know how to tumble up hay in order to load the hay wagon. They would also take time for a little manly recreation. Horse-drawn implements began to make farming somewhat less labor-intensive. And led to the need for larger barns. We put our skills to work recycling buildings. The Unitarian Church was transformed into an Oddfellows Lodge. Our work was not restricted to the summer months. We sugared in the spring, hunted and trapped in the fall. The fruits of our efforts were sold or bartered with local merchants. As our settlements expanded, we created a demand for supplies and services. We added value to our natural resources by processing timber as well as farming. Steam power as well as water power was used to run our sawmills. Lumber, clapboards, and shingles were taken to the railhead in Middlesex for shipment to distant markets. More travel, of course, required more road maintenance. and the ubiquitous horse needed blacksmiths for more than an oil change every 3,000 miles. We built large buildings containing apartments, meeting halls, and stores. And storekeepers. Sawmills created an endless demand for timber as well as the need for a shave and a haircut. Villages expanded as handsome townhouses were built. The houses were also multi-purpose, as doctors, pettifoggers, and even cobblers conducted their practices at home. The Pingree House was the location of an early medical practice conducted by Dr. Jocelyn. Combination of houses, churches, and streets combined to form a pleasant main street. The earliest frame house in Waitsfield was built by General Benjamin Waite. Originally a single-story structure, the building was moved to its current location and a second story added after the General's death. Our farmsteads, while somewhat more modest, were not without architectural detail. Life was not, however, all work. Time was made for social occasions, often centered around church and the holidays. Music was an integral part of these activities. Congregations supported their churches. Even today, we continue the celebration of Christmas with our children in much the same fashion. Our houses of worship incorporated classical architectural detail. Music lessons retain their traditional popularity. But the end result was joyous, if not classical, music. The Waitsfield Congregational Church, whose architect was the minister, anchors the center of the village. We learned some less than traditional instruments. And presented some traditional pageants. We dressed up to have our picture taken at home. and in a studio. We moved outside cargo with our version of today's 22-wheel tractor-trailer combinations. We celebrated the installation of memorials, and remembered our ancestors with centennial celebrations. Prior to the introduction of the telephone, all commerce and communications were conducted at speeds no faster than a horse could travel. A trip to the store meant either walking or hitching up a horse. For travel over longer distances, J.J. Kelty would be happy to take you to or from the train in Middlesex. His standard fare was 75 cents. He moved on roads like this one in Waitsfield Village, which meant that in the spring it could get pretty muddy in spots. We were proud of our animals. Herb Smith had a particular fondness for his horse named Midnight. We lavished as much or more care on our horses and buggies as people do today on their automobiles. Even children might have their own governess cart and pony. We could enjoy ourselves in spots that would be difficult to access in today's SUVs. As young children, we were often forced to improvise, but we didn't mind if the goat didn't. We welcomed the first automobile in town without much comprehension of the full consequences, both good and not so good, that would accompany the internal combustion engine. Winter was challenging for everyone. The farmers kept a wary eye on his dwindling firewood and hay supply and prayed that his water supply did not freeze. No one envisioned that the background to the snow-covered landscape that greeted us every day would one day be punctuated with ski trails from top to bottom. We continued to keep our roads passable during the winter, but spring would bring a different set of conditions. As snow melted and ice began to loose its grip on the dam, mud began to appear in the roads as the afternoon shadows started to shorten. Until finally the ice went out, sometimes with unfortunate consequences. This barn was subsequently jacked back into position and served a useful function for another 50 years. Then, as now, for everything there was a season. A time for reflection. A time to pass on. But, as always, the future was at the door.